Welcome back everybody to the 21st update of my Blu-ray collection, and Arrow Video currently have a Shocktober sale on where a lot of their films are half price or better, especially the standard editions, and yeah, that meant that it was really a no-brainer in terms of getting several films that I've been really wanting in my collection for a while now. So cheaper means I'm not only getting good films, but I'm also getting them at a cut price as well. So yeah, one of the ones I've been meaning to get for a while now has been Big Trouble in Little China, released in 1986, directed by John Carpenter, starring Kurt Russell, and it's a really madcap mix of fantasy, martial arts, comedy, and action. And yeah, not my favourite John Carpenter film by any means, but still a really good mix of genres. Even though it's 100 minutes long, it flies by in no time at all, and yeah, easily one of the more unique films of the 80s. And speaking of that decade, we have 1980's Dressed to Kill, directed by Brian De Palma. Now, again, like John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China, this is not my favourite Brian De Palma film by any means, but it's better than some of his lesser films by a long way. And yeah, still, as far as erotic thrillers go, this is still well up there and kind of set the template for other erotic thrillers. You think of the likes of Fatal Attraction or Basic Instinct, then yeah, this is right along those kind of lines, even though it has a bit of a more of a twisted kind of like plot to it. But yeah, really rather violent, really got a sexualized nudity in it as well, which is kind of the norm for Brian De Palma. But it also has a superb score by Pino Donaggio, who also did the fantastic score for Don't Look Now. So yeah, I'm all in on that film, quite frankly. And then we have a bit of a newer film from 2018, Aniara, which is a Swedish film. It's an all Swedish cast, I think, but it also is all in Swedish in terms of the language. So if you're not into that kind of thing, which I don't know why, it's only subtitles, it's not hard to read. But yeah, fantastic sci-fi film. Not particularly long, 106 minutes long, and yeah, it wasn't made for all that large of a budget, but it still has superb special effects, really good production design, and yeah, it's got a really rather quite dark story to it. Basically, Earth is on the brink of catastrophe, it's falling apart, so they send these big ships off with thousands of people off to go find a new world. But unfortunately, the one that this film is set on is knocked off course, and then you basically have this giant ship which has enough resources for a while, but it's basically just floating in space, going nowhere, and yeah, just in the void of space with no hope of rescue or finding a proper planet to live on. So yeah, basically charts the collapse of a society, and it's really well done. Really quite dark though, and it contains a lot of strong sex and nudity. So if you're not into that kind of thing, then don't bother. But yeah, fantastic film and easily one of my recent favourites of the last few years. Moving on to a completely different kind of sci-fi film from 1956, we have Warning from Space. Like Aniara, this is a foreign film. It's a Japanese film. But yeah, really good film. Not the best sci-fi film from the 50s in Japan, but still a really solid film in its own right. But the main reason I got this was because while watching Suicide Squad, which is easily one of my favourite films of the year, we had a villain in that called Starro, who, while watching that, actually reminded me of what is in this film. Because, as you can see, I actually couldn't stop laughing to myself while watching Suicide Squad because all I was being reminded of was that. And I've looked up, Starro came out in the comics in 1961, so I'm not saying that there's any copyright infringement or any, stealing from one another or anything like that, but it did make me laugh that only a few months prior I had watched this, and yet when watching Suicide Squad, we had someone that basically looked the same, just in a bigger CGI form, and yeah, that just made me laugh quite a lot, so yeah, there is that. So yeah, now we have a few spaghetti westerns, which I've been meaning to get for a while now, but even though they're not my favourite kind of spaghetti westerns, I certainly do prefer the likes of Sergio Leone films. But yeah, the first one is Texas Adios from 1966. Now, in some countries, this was released as a sequel to Django, because that also starred Franco Nero in the same kind of role, but it's not actually a sequel to Django. But even so, it's still a good film in its own right, even if I don't prefer it to Django. But yeah, Franco Nero's great. You've got really good action scenes, stunning locations, and stylish cinematography. And yeah, it's a solid film in its own right. And yeah, it actually came with a booklet as well, which I wasn't expecting, because these are, at the end of the day, standard releases, and standard releases typically don't come with a booklet. But yeah, this goes through the cast and crew. It's got an essay called Cut to the Action, the films of Ferdinando Baldi by Howard Hughes, as well as Texas Adios, contemporary reviews compiled by Roberto Curti, and it goes through about the restoration as well. So yeah, they did a 2K scan resolution of the 35mm camera negative, which is good. Means it's not just been, upscaled. So yeah, really good film. Not my favourite spaghetti western, but still a really good one. And then from 1969, also in Italian English, by the way, just like Texas Adios, is Cemetery Without Crosses. Now, unlike Texas Adios or the next spaghetti western we'll be looking at, this is not a film that is playful. It is quite gritty, quite brutal, and even though it is in colour, it does start off in black and white. But yeah, it also stars Robert Hussein, who's also in the fantastic Rafifi, done by Jules Discern, or Discern, however you say his name. And yeah, really nicely done. And this is a double release as well, so you got it on Blu-ray and DVD for your viewing pleasure. But yeah, it's not a fun spaghetti western, but it is a really, really good one regardless of that. So yeah, highly recommend that. And finally, we have from 1972, Lee Van Cleef in The Grand Duel. Now, this is a bit more playful. It's just as violent though as Cemetery Without Crosses, but it's a lot more playful with the whole premise and stuff like that. And yeah, you got a really good score by Louis Bacalov, who also did Django score. He also did the theme tune for that as well, which is a really good theme tune as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, but yeah, this is a lot more playful than Cemetery Without Crosses, and it even has the assistant director to Sergio Leone's on the Bad and the Good and the Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West, Giancarlo Sante as the director. So yeah, it's got some credibility in that regard. And then you've also got Lee Van Cleef in the lead role, who's in several of my favourite films like Day of Anger and The Big Combo. So yeah, highly recommend this if you're into your spaghetti westerns. And I highly recommend the other two as well, because yeah, spaghetti westerns are a lot more wide and varied than you ever think they were, to be honest. They're not all about, dueling or anything like that. There's a lot more to them than that, especially in some of the better films. But even in the kind of middle of the range kind of films like Grand Duel, Cemetery Without Crosses, and Texas Adios, you will have some aspects that are a little bit more different overall. So yeah, fantastic releases overall these are. And yeah, I highly recommend all of them, to be honest. Even if you're just going to rent them, then I highly recommend it. But yeah, my favourites probably out of the bunch are probably Aniara, Dress to Kill, and out of the spaghetti westerns, I'd say Texas Adios, purely because I really like Franco Nero. But yeah, at the end of the day, they're all cheaper than they ever were before, and yet you're still getting the great content in terms of the film itself. So yeah, if you've not looked at the Arrow video sale yet, then I highly recommend doing so. I think it ends on Halloween itself, so you've got a couple of days yet, but yeah, still well worth looking at even before then, just so you can decide what to get, as I have. But yeah, you'll see a couple of films from that sale as well in the Halloween horror haul that I'm doing on the 31st, because I've bought a whole load of films during October that are horror films, and I thought I'd save all of the horror films I'm getting in during this month for that one day. So yeah, there's quite a fair few. You've probably seen them in the background or on the shelf here, but yeah, I had nowhere else to put them, so spoilers, but I still will be talking about them at the end of the day. But yeah, nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.